Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, both in person and online. Really looking forward to today. I'm hoping it can be a good opportunity to connect with colleagues, old and new. So this morning's session, up until the lunch break, will be hybrid. Without sort of further ado, I will pass it over to Kath Noakes, who can give a short welcome from the University of Leeds.
So, welcome everybody, and really nice to see lots of faces I recognise and lots of faces, some new faces as well, which is cool. I'm going to stand here with two hats on. So I'm going to stand here with a HESTIA hat on, which I'm amazingly proud of Doug and the whole team for getting this network, and it's very cool to have it. I'm also standing here with a University of Leeds hat on. So as of this last week, I'm a Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor at the university, which means I get to do the whole official welcomey bit. So it is really, really good to have this happening in Leeds. And I think, you know, from a university perspective, we've got so much going on in the sort of healthy indoor environments, healthy cities spaces. You'll know we've got work that we've done over many years around infection transmission, lots of stuff around energy poverty, just transitions, loads of stuff on air quality across the campus. So lots of people do indoor and outdoor. And I know there are folks here, I think Jim's here somewhere, Leeds Beckett, yeah, over there. So we, you know, increasingly working in partnership between the University of Leeds and our sister university just down the road, Leeds Beckett, and things like looking at city level air quality measurements and thinking about how that plays into a sustainable environments and things. The university is really embedded in the Bourne and Bradford study, which I know, and of course we've got a number of projects which are tied to that going on here. So it's a really kind of exciting time to be doing that. And then I guess I'm going to put my civic hat on as well, because I've got one of those too as a city. Leeds has set out a number of ambitions. It's got 4 key ambitions: health and wellbeing, inclusive growth, strong communities, and a sustainable city. We hit every one of those. So yeah, it's a great time to be doing this. I know we've got representation here, I think, from West Yorkshire Combined Authority as well, who again have real big ambitions around how we deliver healthy, warm, sustainable homes in the net zero space. Plans around retrofit, all of that. There is so much happening in this space that this network is at such a good time, and really great to see people here. Yeah, welcome to the University of Leeds, welcome to Leeds, and enjoy, have a nice day.
I feel wholly inadequate now as someone who doesn't have a Central University Leeds role. I didn't embarrass you, Kath, with that picture of you there, but if anybody does want to take a quick snap. We sort of had 2 main aims, what we wanted to do together today. One was just about getting a broad group of different people working across indoor and outdoor air quality, building design and retrofit, policy, lived experience in the room together. There's several really large research projects that are all ongoing in similar areas, so we want to make sure there's some opportunity for cross-pollination between these different projects, and we'll give a bit of time to talk about those later. One of the sort of main things that we wanted to do for HESTIA today, and this will come in the afternoon session, so apologies for those of you joining online that won't be able to make this, is have what we call a World Cafe section. So this is a data generating exercise. We want to use that session to co-produce what we call a health equity centred engineering approach to building design and retrofit. And as you can see by me tripping over my tongue there, it doesn't particularly roll off the tongue, but what we mean by that, and we'll go into it in a bit more detail in a moment, is that we want to make sure the changes that are happening to homes are not only beneficial for people's health within them, for planetary health, but also potentially as a mechanism to reduce health inequalities. So that's my welcome. We've had our welcome to Leeds. Thank you so much for spending the time in person and online to join us today. I'd say for people online, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat and we'll make sure that your involvement is included as well. I will now pass over to Amber, who's going to be chairing the next session with our keynote speakers.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I will be chairing this next session for the next hour, making sure everything goes smoothly. We have 3 keynote speakers this morning who have kindly offered to give their time to come and speak to us. I would like to introduce our first speaker. Let me find the slides. So our first speaker is Rosamund Adoo-Kissi-Debrah, who is the director and founder of the Ella Roberta Foundation, which campaigns for clean air quality for all.
Can I take this opportunity to thank HESTIA for obviously inviting me here. So I think here I want to concentrate on my role at BESA as the honorary president for wellbeing in buildings, and to explain to you, I want to explain a little bit about my background in indoor air and how I came into being in this space on indoor. Normally I get called to talk about outdoor air because obviously if anyone in the room doesn't know, my daughter remains the only person in the world to have air pollution on her death certificate, and that was more to do with outdoor air than indoor air. But I just wanted to give you, and you can check with, that's my son over there filming, you can check with him. If I say anything and you think, oh, is she speaking the truth? Well, he will be here today to verify it anyway. So my journey into indoor air was when I didn't even really know that we were dealing with indoor air. And what I mean by that is in our house, we don't have any carpets. And when Ella was ill and we didn't know what her triggers were, I have to confess to you, I became a little bit obsessed. Because when doctors can't find out what is wrong, you then start looking around your house because her attacks started at home first. And so when you have a child who's never been ill and you suddenly show up with a child on death's door, everyone is kind of going to look at you a bit funny to start off with. Then my background, if those of you who didn't know, is I used to be head of sixth form, and my first subject, my first degree is in psychology. So I know a lot about Munchausen syndrome. So I began to already, when I kept on showing up with this child, they would think, is she one of those parents? So I have to almost say to you, when Ella had her first attack in hospital, I kind of almost felt relieved because I thought, at least there you are, I'm not exaggerating. And the reason why I say that is, I have to repeat again, Ella was a very well child until she wasn't in October 2010. So she wasn't known to the services. So can you imagine when you show up with a child almost half dying, they think, who are they and what the heck is going on? And especially when they investigate and they thought, we don't know what her triggers are. And the late Colin Wallace and I, we accepted at some point that we had been looking in the wrong direction. And when I say we, as a psychology lecture teacher, I always taught children research, so I knew how to look for things. And we definitely were looking in the wrong direction. Although when Ella had her bronchoscopy in October 2010, and while she was down there and she almost died on the table, I did bring up a study that she had what you call coughing syncope, you know, when you continuously cough, and it was linked to lorry drivers. And I did admit at the time, for lorry drivers, Ella, there was no child at that time who had coughing syncope. I could not see the link, by the way, between lorry drivers who had coughing syncope and my daughter. I now, some of you may disagree, I now put that down to lorry drivers who they may still drive lots of diesel vehicles at the time, and what they were breathing in, that's how they got coughing syncope, and that's the link between Ella and my daughter. So at home, I was checking for mold, none. We had a few rugs, I removed them. There was a boiler in Ella's room, and I was convinced because, you know, even when someone came to test it, they said, not the boiler. Didn't want to hear it. I went, move it. And I remember Kevin saying to me, Ros, that's a lot of money to spend. There's nothing wrong with the boiler. I went, don't care, move it. Then for a couple of weeks or a month, she didn't have an attack. So then I thought, yeah, that's it, I've solved it. Until the next one came, because as we all know, it wasn't the boiler. We know ultimately what it was. And whilst we were doing all that, so in our house, we've never been able to have domestos, you know, those very strong chemicals, because I think we are an atopic family. I've got to admit, we start off with a bit of eczema, hay fever, and then asthma. Although my twins, thankfully, and it's weird because the ones in the room, none of them have had asthma on the level. Ella was quite unique. And I've said to people, we have volunteered for a study in Oxford, and later on this year, we may get some explanation. They're doing genetic sequencing, and it's amazing how technology is now. We have Ella's, I asked for Ella's DNA to be taken when she dies. Maybe I was always a scientist, and we've used that DNA with ours, and we hope they will give some explanations. So that's my role. So all along, I didn't know what I was doing was even about indoor air, but now I've even taken it a step further. We now have, when we're talking about gas cookers, we now make sure we have an extraction fan, which is going outside. We literally have no blinds in our, in curtains. We don't have any of that. So I feel like I've done as much as I can at home to make them safe. Maybe Lisa might come round and maybe there might be a few other things we can tidy up. So that's my experience. What I did want to mention here before I even go into anything is the data that's available on the number of, and if you're a bit squeamish, my apologies if it's going to trigger anyone, is the number of deaths. Because everything else I can ramble on about, but I think this is one of the most important things. So I'm going to mention that this time first, and that's the child mortality report. I want to mention that first. So even if time's up, at least you have this data. And I must read it here so that I don't get it wrong, because I think it's disrespectful to miss out any children. So between the 1st of April 2019 and the 31st of March 2024, 74 children have died in temporary accommodation, and as a contributing factor to their vulnerability, ill health, or death. Of these 74 children, 58 were under the age of 1. And for me, that's where this talk really should start. Forget all the other rambling I was doing. And between the 1st of October 2023 and September 2024, 80 children had died, and that accounts for 3% of the total number of child deaths during this period. So we have a problem, and I have actually asked for us to meet with the Secretary of State, Steve Reed, to address this issue. And I think even coming up the stairs was already boring Adam. I was like, yes, the government want to build 1 million homes, but unless they're fit for purpose, they might as well not even build one. And I generally feel very strongly about this. And my role into this was Stephen Holgate, Frank Kelly, and all the other eminent scientists. I went in January 2020 when Stephen was launching his report into indoor air. And I think for me, that's when I really began to take it really seriously. And January 2020, there was quite a big launch. We were all there, and we all know. So that was, I think, it was on the 20th of January 2020. And let's put it this way, within a month of that, or even less than that, I think by the end of January, the 31st of January, Tedros had already sounded the warning about COVID. I know the government were like, we didn't know anything about it, but I seem to know about it. So that report, which Stephen launched, I don't think it got the traction that it should have come. And there were too many people who contributed to it, and I don't want to, I've only mentioned Stephen and Frank, but there were so many other people, and that's where I even met Bryony on there. But that really opened my eyes, and I was really, really involved in that. Then at some point, I can't remember, it was before Shirley Rodriguez left GLA, I had seen a report that said 866,000 children had not gone back to school since COVID, and a lot of them were vulnerable. And I struggle now when people, or no, not people, governments are saying, there's 1 million children unemployed, what's going on? I knew when Shirley Rodriguez was at the GLA that this will become a problem. Because if 866,000 children have not gone back to school, that tells me as a teacher, having my teacher hat on, some of them should have been doing GCSEs, A-level. So I knew this problem was always coming. And I am not standing here and going the big I am. I'm just a little bit surprised when suddenly the government are like, we've got 1 million children, because I wonder how many of those 866,000 have now veered into the million. So it's not, and I think my children were 12 or 13 at the time. And I was one of those that I knew when they were indoors all the time, they were screaming blue murder. And the advantage and the privilege I have having access to doctors. I remember we went to we still had to go to consultations during COVID. And I remember speaking to Dr. Charlotte Damon, is it safe for the children to sort of come out? And she said she was less bothered about masks, believe it or not. She was more about social distancing. And, I wouldn't even pretend, Rob, I know more about biology than you. Now that you've managed to get your A, I feel like I'm a subsidiary. But I remember she was talking to him about if you're far apart, the viruses can't travel, it needs to drop. So you're quite safe as long as you go out and you social distance. He knows more about COVID than I do. So there you are. So I sent my children out. I didn't break any rules, but they were social distance, going in the park. Because I knew having kids at home mentally was just, what were they meant to do? And I felt that I struggled to even just nag them to get up, to even log onto their computers. So this explosion that has happened with mental health, again, I'm not surprised. And I struggle, and this is not a secret. I did say to the health secretary when I met him, some of your words, I'm just not appreciating it from the point of view that I feel as if we are blaming children, we're blaming parents, and I am not surprised what has happened. And no, they're not flaky, no, but maybe we underestimated COVID. So due to that, to cut a long story short, we began with Catherine Sutton. Need to give her big credit. She's the secretary at the Ella Roberta Foundation, and she's heavily into this. Her and I got together, went to see Shelley Rodriguez, and we persuaded her to get filtration into schools. So Shirley actually started this before she left GLA, and it's taken a long time to get where we are. It had to go out to tender, So I have some knowledge. Well, one thing I knew, having filtration in classrooms is a good thing. It lowers the viruses, and being a teacher, teachers are always off with illnesses, colds, So I was heavily behind it, because someone did contact me and say, I'm sure that thing Sadiq's doing in London with filtration, I bet that's got something to do with you. I didn't care who took the credit for it as long as it got in. And on my mission now, going around to other mayors, the data are out with Henry Beveridge. I need to go to him, and maybe Kath might be able to tell me some of the, if she knows about it, some of the early signs, how good it is and whether they're being effective. But Henry with the person, with the Sammy, I'll go to find out. So that is my work on air filtration. And one of the things I said to the Mayor of London, hopefully by the end of his term, is it 2028, 2029, I would like the ambition would be if they were in all London schools, whether we're going to get there. He's originally started with 200, but obviously we know there are more schools. And now that he's rolled it out, I believe that gives me agency. When I meet other mayors, I can talk about it. So any mayor I now see, I will be talking about air filtration in schools. Obviously, we have never burnt wood. You can double check with him. And also we had a health summit, November 2025 on the 28th. Good morning, Stephen. No, he's not late. I'm greeting him. That sounds very teacherish there, very sudden. So no, I didn't know the effects of wood burning. I think our stage is, I think we've burned wood maybe once or twice, and I've been in that house for 24 years. That's why we never even went there. But was I shocked to find out how carcinogenic it is? Yes, I have. And Sir Chris Whitty won't mind me saying, he has actually said, and for those of you that don't know, at the health summit with Ella's inquest, coroner's asked, but wood burning came up. And he did say it has less to do with fuel poverty and it's more to do with the, because when I first, you're always a little bit nervous that, oh, maybe people who can't afford it, that he said it more or less has nothing to actually do with that. This is like a time. And we do know in Scotland who don't have central heating and need it. That is not who we're talking about. And we don't have central heating, but those are not ones. And in London, I would say some of the reason, even during COVID, where PM 2.5 didn't go down, is down to wood burning. And before I end my little monologue here, that report I was telling you in 2020, as we all know, we spend about 90% of our time indoors. And I think during COVID, it went up to about 98%. So we spend a lot of our time indoors. What do I firmly believe? That filtration should be not just in schools, but in public buildings, in hospitals, in libraries. I have all these dreams. I don't run the country, as you know, but I have all these dreams that I like to see. And, you know, there's a link between poor air quality and overcrowded housing. I remember COVID, the memories I'm left with is Leicester, when those people, so many of them caught COVID because they were working in those awful factories. And suddenly, COVID over, we seem to forget about all that. I know a lot of it's to do indoor with the use of fuels for cooking and heating, increased number of chemicals from our products. I am learning about this as I go along. I know the estimation from WHO is 7 to 8 million people die prematurely. Frank Kelly has said, please say that word prematurely, due to air pollution. And 3.8 million of that is to do with indoor air. There's an estimated 904,000 homes in England that have damp issues and associated with mold. And I can ramble on and on about stats, but I'm going to stop there. But one thing I am going to say is Nathan Wood, that some of you may know here, sent me, and I haven't finished reading it, a prevention of future death report again recently of a young boy. My apologies if name, you can see I haven't really read it. I think his name is Mohammed, and it is not Awab. This is another child, and the state of his house, although I hadn't read the report, I saw it, and the coroner felt again to issue a prevention of future death report. And I knew when Awab died, it wasn't going to be the end of this story with damp, and I knew that because I hear things, people message me all the time about things that I have no power to do anything. And it's an absolute disgrace that 2026, I was 2025, 2026, that children are still dying from such poor quality of housing. And that's how I feel, because that parent who has lost that child, oh my goodness, is it a long journey to get to where I'm standing now? And as I say, that was today's date. So a month from now will be 13 years that Ella passed away. And I'm going to, see, I still choke all that time. And I'm going to end it there, so rather than rabble on. So I hope I haven't gone over the 50 minutes, and I am going to invest in a stopwatch, I think. That'll be safe. But please, any questions? I'm not going to claim I am the ultimate expert, because I focus so much on outdoor air to get Ella's inquest over the line. But I do remember Chris Whitty saying to me, we've done quite a lot on outdoor air, and we do need to focus on indoor air. And I'm learning all the time as I go on. You know, as an academic, you never ever stop learning. So if Kath Noakes is in the room, I'm not even going to dare go there. That I am. You can challenge me on outdoor air, but indoor air, I humbly give it over to Kath. So thank you very, very, very much for. But this is an area that we do need to highlight. And I also believe that with indoor air, outdoor air is so difficult for people to do something about. But indoor air, we know like the link with candles and all sorts of things, like we said, chemicals and cooking. I do think this is an area that some have the privilege of doing something about. But I understand, you know, cost of living crisis. If you are poor, then this is yet again another thing. So there are others who may need some help. But may I stop rambling, and thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, yes, that's on. We'd like to open the floor up to questions.
Hi, a very inspiring talk. Thank you very much. So one thing that I wanted to ask was for your insights as to why you think there is Awaab's law and yet not yet Ella's law.
Oh, yes. And thank you for asking that question. And just to say, I consider indoor air that important that it is in Ella's law. So maybe aspects that Awaab's law didn't pick up, we will pick it up in Ella's law. The difference, that's very easy for me to say, the difference between Awaab's law and Ella's law and why I felt the government picked up that is I feel the onus is more on landlords to do something about. By the way, when you're doing the job I do, at some stage you have to try and not take it so personally, if you see what I mean. You have to look at the high level. Because if every time I got a disappointment from the government and I took it personally, I don't think I'd be standing here now even talking to you. So I personally believe, i.e., it's nothing personal. It's about money. There are those who now say, I need to lobby Rachel Reeves because it's about money and treasury, i.e., I haven't met a minister in health, transport, or DEFRA who disagrees with what I want. But all they say is they need money to do it. And I do not stand here and tell you that what I'm asking in Ella's law is easy to get us to WHO. That would be a fantasy. It is difficult, but that does not mean we shouldn't try and do it. Do I think it's going to be expensive? Yes, I do. Do I think it is worthwhile? Yes. Because the RCP report that came out Clean Air Day last year, the estimation is 500 people a week are dying prematurely due to link to other health issues. So it will save them ultimately a lot of money if they took this matter seriously. But maybe I need to persuade Rachel Reeves. I didn't know I had access to her, but apparently I can write to her. And she will see how I see myself. I don't see, but apparently I can write to her and go and make my case to her. And the CMO thinks I could do that. So to me, it's about money. And the government do say also things like, oh, PM 2.5, the ambient air is too difficult for us to deal with, from Europe, as you know, as a scientist. They just make up. No, I do think there's something to do. And Sadiq Khan has shown in London that if you take action, there's something. It's about money and nothing else. I feel governments it's not as popular. And that's when we come into the thing, please lobby for Ella's law. And we're also lobbying for a public health campaign because the RCP report, I'm nicking the RCP report, showed, they did a survey. 95% of people, they know the link between air pollution and respiratory now, but all the other things like, preterm births and the link with cognitive decline, etc. This is not known to the public. We may know it here, but not everyone out there does. And we believe there needs to be a public health campaign, not just borough by borough. It needs to be backed by the government. And that's what I think needs to happen in this year, where the 70th anniversary is coming up of the Clean Air Act in July. I think it's the 5th. I'm sure Gary will say if I'm wrong or right, 5th of July or somewhere around there it is. Have I got time for anyone else to ask a question?
I think we've got time for one more question. There was one online that would like to be asked.
I'll apologise in advance if I mispronounce your name. We've got a question for Adrian Tiedemann, who's saying that they've done a lot of work monitoring indoor air quality, visiting social housing and schools, and they're seeing a number of things prevalent that are perfect for mold formation, no heating, washing indoors, and no ventilation. Sort of conversations they've had, it seems to come up a lot that they send somebody out to basically slap paint on the wall and not actually look at the issue, and they've contacted housing agents and they don't seem interested. So Adrian's keen to know what your sort of thoughts on this are.
It's a scandal. And also, when you truly understand mold, I think something, and Adam's here to clarify it, I don't know whether there are actually any standards when it comes to mold. Maybe that might be...
We're working.
Right. So that's one thing. There's no official standard. But I think generally people feel that if there's a bit of mold, you can just clean it and then it makes it okay. And that's part of the problem. I was hoping Awaab's law would pick that up. But if it doesn't, then we need to look at Ella's law and try and get the standards and stuff into Ella's law then maybe. But it's a scandal because there are people who know how to treat all this and do something about it. So I'm hoping what AWAB's law at least initially is doing is those that are responsible for social housing, etc., they are able to do something about it. And to me, it's about responsibility and accountability, etc. Yes, again, the poorest people, yes, again, are the ones who pick up this burden. What a shocker. Yeah, it's not acceptable, but they up until now, they've been getting away with it. But they need to be held accountable is all I can say. And there are laws there, but they probably need to be enforced is all I can say about that.
Thank you
I hope
very
I haven't
much.
ducked the question, and that's, yeah, okay.
It's a scandal.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more
obviously,
questions, but
unfortunately, it needs to come up in.
if you'd like to join me in thanking Rosamund again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We will now move on to our next speaker. I would like to introduce Brian Horne, who is the Technical Knowledge Lead at the Energy Saving Trust, which is an independent organisation that promotes energy efficiency, low carbon transport and sustainable energy use.
Hi, good morning, and thanks for giving me the chance to speak here. After a quick introduction, I'm going to talk through, got three subject headings there: fabric first, whole house approach, and beyond whole house. This is essentially going to be a potted history from my perspective of energy retrofit in the UK, and where that's gone wrong, mainly. That's what it's about. So, good intro. Energy Saving Trusts, we're an independent body. Our mission is to address the climate emergency by empowering households to make changes, essentially. So reducing carbon emissions from home energy use is our primary aim, but we care deeply about all the other elements, all the other aspects that impact on people's lives, not only because we're a bunch of people who care about these things anyway, but because the people we are talking to definitely care about them. And we need to understand what households want and need if we're going to advise them, even if we were only thinking about energy. I'm the Technical Knowledge Lead. So it's my job to make sure our advice is as accurate and appropriate as possible. And I've been working in the sector forever, really. So this brief history is based largely on my experience of working in this sector. So 36 years. When I started, the fabric first principle was very much a thing that energy advice was driven by. I don't think it was cool back then, but there have been lots of definitions of what fabric first means, but usually they are something like this, that we should have, when we're looking to save energy in a home, we should prioritise improvements to the fabric of the building before spending money on expensive low carbon heating systems and generation. This is a rule of thumb, really, and is designed to make sure, encourage that money spent in an appropriate way to save the most energy, to reduce bills. And it was developed at a time when there were lots of cheap and apparently low risk energy improvements available to be made, like loft insulation and cavity wall insulation and draft proofing. And you couldn't buy a heat pump, and you had to be super rich to buy a solar panel. And its purpose to maximise the financial and the carbon saving per pound spent, really. That was the thinking behind it. This has led to some issues over the years. It's become viewed as an immutable law rather than a rule of thumb. The fabric first principle makes it sound like it's a principle of physics or something. when it isn't. And it has become less and less appropriate as a rule of thumb over time for a number of reasons, but the two main ones are the number of easy win measures has decreased. Nearly all lofts in the country have some insulation. A lot of them have quite a lot of insulation. Most of the easy to fill cavity walls have been easily filled, and most draft proofing and genuinely drafty buildings has it actually been done. And the cost of low carbon heating and generation has decreased. So now if you go and look at a property and you look at what's the most expensive energy upgrade you can do to that, it won't be solar panels and it probably won't be a heat pump. It's probably going to be external wall insulation or something like that. It's the one that really makes your eyes water. This has focused attention on fabric improvements that are expensive, difficult, and risky. That's one of the issues we have definitely seen from a fabric first approach over time, which leads to unintended consequences, the dreaded word amongst energy retrofit and in other spheres as well. Now, this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'm going to take the time to talk through it because I think it's worth it. Right, top left, we've got the focus on reducing heat loss. That can lead to lots of good things, but these are two examples of when it can go wrong. It can make you focus on air tightness because that's relatively cheap to do in many situations, but that can often lead to inadequate ventilation. Inadequate ventilation, we know, increases the risk of poor indoor air quality because the pollutants are not removed from the house, and that leads to health problems, as we all know. We've just said a lot about that. Inadequate ventilation will also lead to condensation because all the water vapour in the house is not removed so quickly. Condensation, as we know, leads to mould, which leads to health problems, as we know. Condensation can also lead to structural damage. If water can build up over time within the structure of the building, that will eventually rot timbers. It will damage all sorts of types of building structure. If we take the other route go back to the beginning, focus on reducing heat loss. Another thing that has encouraged, particularly through government-led programmes, is focusing on solid wall insulation in older homes. You're probably mostly aware that cavity walls most homes built in the middle chunk of the 20th century had empty cavities in them, and the relatively cheap insulation method was to fill those cavities. I'm not going to talk about the risks and pros and cons of cavity wall insulation right now. That's another day. But older properties before 1915, 1920 were built with solid walls. Insulating those walls is more expensive. So it only started to happen when people really focused on fabric first. That can lead to another set of issues. The simplest one there I put in there is heritage loss. If you insulate the walls, you're making changes to the appearance and the fabric of the building. Older buildings is where our building heritage lives mostly, and insulating the walls can affect that. But it's a technology that we've done very little of in the UK until we got government programmes supporting it in a big way. So we had a lot of new installers, inexperienced installers, trying to work out how to do this. They were also working on older buildings. Most old buildings are poorly maintained buildings. There's been a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong with those buildings over time, and we're not very good in this country at maintaining our buildings. It's also an expensive technology, sort of expensive system. There have been a number of programs that have required energy companies and others to implement a certain number of these projects at a huge cost. So there's been a strong drive to cut costs in doing that, because a lot of organisations with big targets, eye-watering costs to it. So anything they could do to reduce those costs, they would like to do. So we've got inexperienced installers working on poorly maintained buildings while trying to cut costs. Those three together have led to poor design and installation. And that's a small box on this diagram, but it's a huge, you cannot overstate how many poor quality installations went ahead. You'll have read about some of that in the news recently and in the past. That's caused a few things. It's caused lots of problems. It hasn't all been bad. There have been some good examples, but there have been a lot of bad examples as well. And that causes a lot of problems. The three I picked out here are, one is it's a relatively small one really, but that in itself leads to inadequate ventilation, because when you insulate, if you do insulate a building well, you're likely to be sealing air gaps as well, even if you do nothing else to reduce infiltration. So that, and inexperienced installers won't think about the ventilation system when they're fitting insulation. So you get inadequate ventilation, you can do condensation, poor indoor air quality, mold, as before. You also get disruption of vapour flow. This is how moisture in the air in the building moves through the fabric of the building. Rather than through the air holes, it moves through the masonry into the outside air. Some people will go to town and they say old buildings were designed to breathe, which is, I have two issues with that sentence, but let's not get sidetracked. But definitely, whenever you insulate a solid wall, whenever you insulate an element, you change how vapour performs in it. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you get increased risk of condensation at some point on the inside. On the gap between the insulation and the wall is a common issue. Interstitial condensation leading to structural damage. Condensation also leads to mould, leads to health problems. Going back to the poor design installation, another thing that you get is thermal bridging. For those of you who are energy sector, this is where you get, if you insulate most of a property, but you leave gaps, a gap between the wall and the ceiling, gap around a window, gap over a lintel, gaps where you put pipes and wires through the wall. All of those gaps, they create something called a thermal bridge, which is where heat escapes through an insulated bit of the wall, but you get more heat escaping through that per square metre than if you hadn't insulated the wall in the first place. So you get, and if you get poor design of an insulation of a home retrofit, you will get a lot of thermal bridging that seriously limits the thermal improvement that you get. You do not get anything like the energy savings that you would expect to get from insulating the property, because the model used to do the sums didn't account for the thermal bridging that your installer has actually gone ahead and done. This leads to excessive cold, which leads to increased bills and health problems in its own right. And there's one line in there that I haven't mentioned, which is that thermal bridging leads to cold spots on the walls, colder than they were before you even started insulating in some cases. And so that's where you're most likely to get condensation, you're going to get mould, leading to health problems. That's a very quick summary of the bigger unintended consequence issues we've been seeing with home retrofit following, not because it's following a fabric first principle, but these are all aspects of poor quality retrofit that have been driven in part by the fabric first principle being applied inappropriately. Because of of that, a number of people have proposed a better approach. One of the bigger things driving this was when the scale of this problem first became apparent in the UK, there was something that was originally called the Bonfield Review. It ended up being called something else. But that looked at all the problems, the unintended consequences in home retrofit, and tried to come up with an approach that would manage it better. And it's broadly known as the whole house approach. Other people talk about the whole house approach. It didn't all come from the Bonfield Review. But whole house approach has even more definitions than fabric first. My brief summary is we should look at, it's commonly stated something like, we should look at the whole building when planning and implementing retrofit to ensure that all the improvements we make work together successfully to achieve the desired result. Sounds good. It's a guiding principle intended to encourage a more holistic thinking and more planning in an area which often never has any planning, to minimise the risk of unintended consequences. A couple of standards were developed in the UK to cover this. PAS 2035 about the overarching approach, and PAS 2030 about how to install stuff within that approach. It's had its issues. There are multiple definitions of interpretations of whole house approach. If you want to confuse an AI bot, ask it what whole house approach means. You'll get pages and pages of stuff. Some include fabric first as a fundamental principle in the whole house approach without clarifying how it should be applied. As 2035 has got it in, and it not in a helpful way, as far as I'm aware. It just throws it in as though it helps, without saying how to include it. Some interpret whole house approach as a need to do full deep retrofit in one go. That it's not allowed to go in and fit just loft insulation or just to fit solar panels or just insulate the walls, which is incorrect. Whole house approach can cover phased upgrade. You just need to, as long as it's planned and coherent. Some definitions of whole house approach, or some interpretations of whole house approach, highlight the multiple impacts of retrofit and the need to balance these. But others really don't. They just say, as long as you're looking at the whole building, you're fine. This can lead to a number of issues. But one of the obvious one is that means you could be designing a retrofit program and not thinking about any of the issues we're here to talk about today. You could just be focusing on energy. You might just be focusing on fuel poverty. You might just be focusing on carbon reduction, which is a particular example here, in that you can decarbonise a home without considering the fabric. You can decarbonise a home without considering internal air quality, affordability, any of those other things. You can throw technology in there and decarbonise it. Pretty much every home, well, yeah, every home in the country, if you throw enough money at it, you can do that. And if your focus is purely carbon, you can use a whole house approach to justify that. Because you are looking at the whole house. You can do all that without affecting vapour, without increasing mould risk, but by spending an awful lot of money to create a home that's very expensive to live in. But probably I would say the worst failing of the whole house approach to date has been because it costs more money to do it, so people don't want to do it. PAS 2035 specifies certain roles. You have to have a certified retrofit coordinator. Costs money to become certified as a retrofit coordinator. You need a retrofit assessor. You need retrofit certified installers. It costs £400 to get a retrofit assessment of a home, and that's just the starting point. And it's not a legal requirement for any retrofit project. 1 minute, okay. PAS 25 is a requirement for funding schemes, but that means that encourages tick box compliance, and that's what happened. All the stuff about Eco4 and the problems that have been in the media lately, that's basically because people have been cutting corners. So I want to talk about beyond Whole House. I've got 1 minute. This is about how we should look at the whole building and all the potential impacts on occupants, society, and the environment. Planning and implementing retrofit to ensure that all the improvements we make work together successfully to achieve the desired results for everyone. Some people think that's what Whole House approach means. Some people don't. But my ask is that it becomes that, or we can otherwise come up with a system that covers all of these. This is off the top of my head, a hit list of things, impacts we should be considering when doing retrofit. And probably today's people here will agree with some or all of those. Barriers, what could we call it? How do we avoid it being diluted if it happens? How do we encourage it? Big questions. What do we call it? I don't think any of those are great. I've included health equity centred engineering at the bottom out of politeness, but
I didn't know.
yes. I'm not proposing that as a front runner. Any thoughts on that? Appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. We are running a little bit late, so we're going to leave questions if that's okay. If you'd like to join me in thanking Brian one more time. Our final speaker of our keynote session. There we go. So I would now like to introduce Marcella Ucci, who is a professor in healthy and sustainable buildings at the Bartlett Faculty of the Built Environment at UCL. She is also the director of the UCL Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering. Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me? So, partly introduce myself, but I also wanted to mention that I wear a couple of hats today. So, professor at UCL, director of the UCL Institute for Environmental Design Engineering. I'm also vice chair of the UK Indoor Environments Group, and indeed we have the chair of UKIEG here, Sunny, and next to her, Alejandro, who is the secretary. And I've been a committee member of the UKIEG since 2005, believe it or not, 20 years, a long time. I'm also co-chair of the CIBSI Health and Wellbeing Working Group, and I should have also added that I am on the advisory group of the all-party parliamentary groups, Healthy Homes and Buildings. So really engaged and interested in policy, and that's one of the questions why I asked you, Rosamund, about your views about why one law is going ahead and the other one is not, because there's a lot of thinking around, well, what are the levers that can persuade policymakers, right, to improve buildings in this case. So for those of you who are not familiar with the UKIEG, it was set up in 2003 to coordinate and provide a focus and a network around indoor environments. So we're not uniquely about indoor air quality, although of course we focus a lot on that. So we are a unique, independent and impartial multidisciplinary network of professionals. So we typically have a range of academics, policymakers and industry in our midst. We currently have about 300 members. Membership is free, so if you're not a member, email us and you can join us for free. The work is overseen by a committee. The sort of things that we do are annual scientific conferences, and indeed last year's was in Leeds. And I should have said, Marco, sorry, you're also on the committee. Probably there's someone else that I've missed. He's joined us last year as part of this work. We also produce newsletters, partnerships, such as these ones with HESTIA. So we are a partner in HESTIA working groups, and we also have a new LinkedIn site that you can join. So just a couple of reflections about some of the work that UKIEG did. So back in 2017, we published a summary of a policy workshop that we had done with policymakers to discuss the challenges and opportunities around healthy indoor environments. So I've pulled out a couple of recommendations from that report, 2017. So one is a lead government department should be designated to head up the development of a national strategy and policy and coordinate cross-government department around indoor environments. And we do focus especially on buildings. So this request and recommendation is still very valid. And indeed, we did feed into the all-party parliamentary group, Healthy Homes. Thinking, we also made the point at the time that the UK research councils should recognise the cross-disciplinary nature of the issue of indoor environmental quality and well-being, and therefore that they should come up with a framework for funding in this research, because research proposals were falling in between the scope of EPSRC, etc. And so really it's been a great delight to know that at least in the field of indoor air quality and air quality in general, there has been more coordinated funding. So, for example, in our 2020 online conference, I think it was because of COVID, we hosted all, or if not most, of the networks then funded by the SPF Clean Air Network, so which of course Professor Stephen Allgett was chairing. And I should have said that I was also a member of the working group on the RCPCH report, which suddenly was published, as you say, in January, and then we had COVID two months later, and it kind of didn't quite have the same traction. We had also hosted last year a number of networks and hubs, research hubs, that have been funded through dedicated funds, that's the point, right, by research fundings or UK indoor air quality or healthy environments. And we are also proud now to partner with a number of EPSRC micro networks, including HESTIA, to have a series of webinars. So in some ways, the UKIEG is definitely still having its function of what I like to call a super or macro network of around healthy environments. Going back to other matters, in 2015, I believe, we UKIEG committee wrote to COMIP, the Committee for the Medical Effects of Air Pollution, to raise the point about how come the indoor air quality isn't within your scope. Now, I don't want to, they replied to us formally, and I was trying to look through our record, Sunny, about what they replied. But I mean, in essence, in a way, because at the time they were governed by DEFRA, it wasn't within DEFRA scope. But it's a delight to note that COMIP has published a statement on aspects of indoor air quality, or rather indoor air pollution, indoor air quality in December 2025. I picked out some recommendation. I appreciate the slides are very word heavy, but it's interesting to note that they make the point that we still need more data on indoor exposures, and so they recommend a coordinated program of measurements, which could be established by an indoor air quality observatory. They also recommend, however, that a complementary national program of research funding is still needed, and also that a focus on pollutants known to be hazardous to health should be prioritized. The second paragraph says all sorts of things. The one that took my attention is the bit at the bottom. We think that applying the interventions hierarchy, prioritizing prevention of emissions, would be the most effective in improving indoor air quality. So that's interesting, and is worthwhile keeping front and center, because there is a lot of emphasis, for example, on ventilation when it comes to indoor air quality. But of course, even in policy regulation, control of emissions indoors is still very fragmented. So taking a step back, the COMIP statements was also making other comments about to what extent we can apply the kind of those response relationships that apply to outdoor pollutants such as PM 2.5 to indoor. And in essence, they kind of said no. And I'm looking at you, Sunny, if I've got the gist right. But this really is an opportunity to remind ourselves that it's really important to make sure that we always keep health outcomes and, of course, equity outcomes in mind. I was looking for an image, which I couldn't easily find, and I gave up, or two lines that appear to meet and suddenly they diverge, right? So I got this hitting the target instead. And my point here is that there are established approaches in the built environment field, including engineering approaches, to characterize and evaluate indoor environmental quality. But some of the metrics that we typically use in the field, do not have a correspondence to health-based evidence. And so there is a disconnect there when it comes to evaluation. Mold is the perfect example. There are so many different ways of measuring mold and damp risk in buildings. Most of them do not have a correspondence to kind of quantitative health-based metrics, which then makes the evaluation of risk both at the individual dwelling level and population level extremely hard. The other point that I wanted to make was the importance of keeping a focus on problems within a socio-technical lens. And here I have damp and mold as an example. Is the diagram taken from a chapter that I edited. So what this diagram is attempted to illustrate is that if we think about the problem of, let's say, damp and mold and dust mites, which is still important, in buildings, we could just look at this part of the problem. So, of course, we think about, building characteristics, weather condition, building operation, etc. But we have to remember all the time that there are other factors, such as socioeconomic status of residents, driving aspects such as fuel poverty, which in turn then can affect, of course, temperature and relative humidity, driving the ability of residents or landlords indeed to maintain, upgrade and damage remediation. I produced this diagram before lifestyle within the context of damp and mold was a loaded question. I think we shouldn't shy away from the fact that behavioral aspects are important as a risk factor in damp and mold without, pointing fingers. So this idea of a kind of a systems approach to health and equity was, for example, one example is the Act Early project where I was involved, is now concluded, was focusing on reducing upstream determinants of childhood health inequalities. A number of fields, or rather themes. I was co-leading the sub-theme of homes within Healthy Places theme, and it was using a whole systems approach. Now, amongst the number of publications that we had, there was this one. It was a mixed method study looking at the interactions between housing and neighborhood environments for the enhanced child well-being. So the test bed for Act Early was Bradford in Yorkshire and Tower Hamlets in London. Amongst other things, what we found was that in Tower Hamlets in particular, a little more than Bradford, overcrowding was a big problem. It really affected the lived experience of children and their families. But the typical indicators that are used to evaluate and measure overcrowding, i.e. the bedroom standard, do not capture all of the ways in which overcrowding affects the health and well-being of children and their family. I can't go through the details of what I mean, but in essence, as you probably know, the bedroom standards is about how many people share the bedroom, what is their age, what is their gender, and their relationship status. But besides this, which is very much about privacy in a way, there are other aspects, including aspects related to people not wanting to socialize in their homes because they feel it's not safe, because they feel it's not appealing. But at the same time, although we know that in some cases we don't have enough homes to move people, some people choose to remain in their overcrowded dwelling because of the social networks they have locally. So the question is, could there be ways that we can think of that are supporting people remaining in situ? Of course, in some cases, it's too overcrowded and you cannot do it. So there was another study, feasibility study funded by the NIHR in collaboration with Jess Sheringham, where we were looking at the problem of overcrowding, particularly in terms of, okay, if we can't have new builds, what do we do? And what type of levers might be available? For example, should you prioritize repairs and maintenance in heavily overcrowded dwellings? And we also looked at data because I was quite astounded to understand that actually many local authorities and housing associations do not have granular information about which houses are overcrowded. And so this is an attempt in collaboration with Islington Council in London to use data that is routinely available to local authorities to identify households who are overcrowded. We also worked on kind of more conceptual aspects. So this is the adaptation of a conceptual model on housing as a determinant of health equity. So the original model, which is the bit in black, is from Swope and Hernandez. But we, through qualitative research, also made the point that, for example, public services and welfare system at national and local levels play a massive role in these kind of systems and the lived experience ultimately of people. I'm rushing, I know. Other ongoing work. So I'm currently involved in an NIHR funded project on evaluating net zero retrofit and health. This is led by the Bonnie and Bradford group. The work started in July 2025. It includes monitoring of actually properties that are being retrofitted, and also some modeling of building performance and indoor air quality exposure, which I will lead, which will start later on. I'm also co-leading a Lancet series on health equity in cities. I might be co-editing a book on retrofit and health, if we can agree with the publisher and with my own head that I've got the time to do it. And I currently co-chair the CBC Health and Wellbeing Working Group. We have been working on guidance on health and wellbeing and net zero. I see that Emma Gibbons and Anna Mavroyannian are in the room, and so we are the principal authors. Sunny and Kate are also involved. But why I wanted to mention this, because the way that we structure the work is by chapters, environmental factors, okay? So these are the typical indoor air quality, sound, light, blah, blah, blah. Then the other chapter is about resilience to climate change, inclusive design, equity, etc. And then we have a summary of design and operational recommendations. The target audience is building services engineers, so that they are meant to be practical. But what we ended up doing was largely to focus on each factor at a time. In some ways, I feel that there isn't quite enough evidence to really then go down this way and that way in this system. So what happens if you need to think about the synergies and the conflict across indoor air quality, noise, sound, light, etc., etc. But we need to start thinking about that, because otherwise we might have unintended consequences and feedback loops. So some reflection, and I'm nearly concluding. So yes, we need more data. Some is already available, but needs to be linked, and we need to assess existing quality and quality. Co-production of commonly agreed metrics is very important. So, both in terms of all of the disciplines involved, but most importantly, those with lived experience of poor housing quality, inequality, etc. Engineering approaches needs to be scaffolded by socio-technical lens. The size matter and silver bullets, I'll explain it to you another time. And so, in a way, this is a call to action for HESTIA and everyone else in the room to really think about how we need to keep engineering-based approaches, but also how we meet in the middle, health and equity. Also, more evidence on not just what happens when things go wrong, but what happens when things go right. So can we have more evidence about really the advantages of embedding well-being approaches into and equity into buildings? And really, we shouldn't aim for the lowest common denominator, right? The second bit of the WHO constitution is really meaningful to me. The enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the most fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic and social condition. Highest attainable standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcella.
Hey, so welcome to our next session. My name is Suzanne Bartington. I'm a clinical associate professor at the University of Birmingham and also one of the Clean Air champions, presenting here as well on behalf of Breathe In. I'm pleased to say we have two of our other Clean Air champions here in the room today, Gary Fuller and Stephen Holgate at the back of the room. And our role is really to translate all of the work within the 42 million Clean Air programme into policy and practice. So it's been fantastic to hear the really compelling presentations this morning, and I also really enjoyed the different range of perspective through from real world lived experience, policy touched on, as well as the academic perspective as well. So we're now going to move to a quite a quick fire session here where we're going to hear about the new EPSRC funded hubs. And really the importance of presenting these as a coherent package is that we really want to support these to work collaboratively. And we've already heard examples of how that is happening, and we'll hear more about that in this session. But we really, really want to support that collaboration, both leveraging the existing work in the Clean Air programme, which Marcella touched upon already, and also, of course, the new MRC NAHR hubs as well. So we will move on then to the first presentation from Abigail Hathaway, who will be presenting the Air Hub EPSRC micro network. And Abigail, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm Abigail Hathaway from kind of just down the road at the University of Sheffield, and I'm an engineer, and I'm leading one of the sister networks to HESTIA, which is called Air Hub. Quite a generic title. Done a much better job of thinking of your network name in HESTIA than we did with Air Hub. But our focus is on particulate matter indoors. Our proposal is very much written around PM 2.5, although, to be honest, I think as we're developing, we're looking at particulate matter a bit more generally. And the reason for this was because we're well aware that PM 2.5 has a significant impact on health, but also a lot of that understanding has come from decades of work in the outdoor air research. Over the past few years, there has been pockets of really good work indoors, beginning to sort of translate this to indoors, but there's still a lot of questions around our indoor air. We're measuring particulate matter a lot inside, but it's a lot less common that we really understand what that particulate matter is. Is it the same as outside? And in our indoor environments, we have so many different types: schools, homes, offices, factories, underground stations. So those particles will all be quite different. So we felt there's a real need to get a better understanding of what particulate matter inside is made up of, both thinking about sort of chemicals and the biological side of things. What's the constituents, what is made up of, how does that relate to outdoors, and once we understand that, what are the health impacts, and then what are the most equitable and effective ways to reduce the impacts. So we're a two-year network and not looking at answering these questions, but bringing together the people to start planning future research with an idea of creating those future research projects. And the activities are under these four themes that we feel related to this. So air, to start with, is really that technical side of understanding what's in the air and in the particles. Engineering, which is about thinking about the solutions and those engineering solutions in buildings. Health, which is about getting that link between what the particles are made of and the toxicology and the health impacts. And then finally, people, understanding how people interact with their environments, use their environments, what research they want. We've got a range of activities across this network that we hope people will get involved with. So impact panel with professionals in the industry, co-creation workshops with those with respiratory diseases to understand, when they're triggered, how they experience their indoor environments, what research they want to do, but also to work with them to understand how they'd like to engage with research, what sort of methods. We've got a series of webinars we're doing joint with the other networks as well. And then a bunch of workshops, a few of the early ones up here. We've got one coming up on the 5th of February, so a bit of time to promote that now. That's on the health impacts of indoor particulate matter. My QR code should take you to the registration link, or if you Google health impacts of indoor particulate matter Eventbrite, I think you should find it. So that's coming up, and then we'll have a few more workshops that will lead into our sandpit. One on understanding indoor particles, what do we currently know about them? One where we're working with leaders of the sort of large cohort studies and the longitudinal studies in the UK. We're going to come and talk about how, as indoor air scientists in this area, we can link to those studies better to better create that health evidence that we need to. We're looking at ethics in indoor air research and designing technology for people. We'll have our sandpit, not a lot of information on that, but it is on the 8th and 9th of July, where we'll have money to distribute to exciting research projects in this field. So mark that in your diary if this is your area. And building into that, a lot of early career events, both training and informal activities. So if you're early career and this is your kind of area, please try and find me at lunch, come and have a chat about how you can get involved. And that will all lead to a research roadmap. And then finally, a picture of the wonderful team and our our website, which isn't live yet, so don't go and look at it, but put a note in your diary for the end of January to go and look at air-hub.org.uk, and fingers crossed it will have got online by then, so then you can sign up to our mailing list to find out about our future events. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail, and thank you for keeping to time. Hopefully we'll have lots of hits now onto the Air Hub website. So it's now me chairing myself, but I'm presenting on behalf of Bruno Fraga, who is an associate professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Birmingham, who wasn't able to be here today, but he's the PI and lead for the Breathe In Micro Network Plus. I should say the plus bit, in case anyone is wondering, means that the sand pits will be held and funding will be awarded for these pilot or feasibility studies within the lifetime of the network. So here is the team, including, as I said, the lead Bruno Fraga, also Christian Frang at the University of Birmingham, myself, together in collaboration with Sonia and Terence Kantara at the University of Oxford and Vincent Lau at Cardiff. Again, as with all of the networks, there are both public bodies and commercial organisations, as well as local authority, to mention Hertfordshire County Council, as network partners, reflecting the real importance of collaboration. And all of the work of Breathe In is supported by the UK Health Security Agency. The expert advisory board has also been assembled with the names which are shown here as well. So essentially, the aims of Breathe In very much reflect the whole of the theme around engineering healthier indoor environments. And I think really importantly, just to highlight a few words here, holistic solutions to develop those, and that of course necessitates this cross-disciplinary collaboration. And we've already heard some of the challenges if those solutions are not sufficiently holistic, and also making health and well-being at the heart of building design, interventions and monitoring. And that very much resonates with myself as a public health doctor, but also, as we've heard already, that real importance of achieving and aligning health and equity gains with these changes to the indoor spaces. And we want to really generate that legacy of long-term collaboration and funding. I mentioned already, it's really been a journey with indoor air quality. We've already heard the importance of UKIEG as well, in terms of that providing a backbone of collaboration in this space, but also leveraging existing clean air programme investments, including the 6 clean air networks. So what will be happening in Breathe In? Well, things kicked off already in November, and I know several here will have been at the Breathe In launch, which was held in Birmingham. So the network is up and running already. And I wanted to give a shout out for the first roundtable, which is going to be taking place on Friday, the 30th of January, 11 a.m, which will focus on indoor air quality in primary schools in Barcelona. So that will be open to all. And the intention of the roundtables is to support the collaboration ideas that are then taken forward to the sandpit events. There is also plans for a roadmap. What that means is essentially mapping out the learning from the network, lessons learned, both about the process and also what the outcomes are. And this is really built into the legacy. You know, how do we inform research and collaboration in the future? Breathe In has an online presence, so please do go to. I think the go-to place now very much seems to be LinkedIn, and you'll see details there already of the roundtable, which you can sign up for if you wish to attend. And you can also sign up for the mailing list. And so the 2 sandpits, so there'll be 2 sandpits in Breathe In, the first of which is planned for late April 26, and the second one will be through in spring 27. So you need to be there at the sandpit in order to be successfully awarded funding. So that's a condition, is participation. And we very much encourage cutting edge ideas, novelty, those which involve early career researchers and are strongly interdisciplinary as well. The 2 sandpits broadly will focus firstly on prevention interventions, which you can see on the horizontal intersect in the diagram shown on the right on the screen. And secondly, diagnosis and monitoring at that sandpit, which is taking place in spring 27 on that vertical axis in the diagram. So I'm aware of time, and I should stick to time as chair. And just to say that the kind of funding envelope to be awarded is 260,000 across those two sandpits, and that will be spread across large and smaller projects of approximately 60,000 for large projects and 30,000 for small projects, just to give a kind of indication of scale of funding that is available. I mentioned early career researchers, but also I wanted to say the importance of public involvement. And this is something which is quite new to EPSRC, but well established in the health research community. And we very much want to support the involvement of real people. And it's great we've got some of the HESTIA public members online today, but also in the Breathe-In network, that public involvement. We heard about the co-creation in AirHub as well, to be involved in that process in terms of the review of those applications and awarding of funding. So I will stop there. Thanks. Thanks, Prashant. So really pleased to welcome next Prashant Kumar from the University of Surrey, who's going to give us an introduction to the Green-In Micro Network Plus.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to speak about this network. I can't see any plants actually in this room, which is anyway. So Green-In is one of those sister networks which were funded in this call. So the name suggests, Green-In means it's all focused around indoor environments. So this is a consortium which includes the University of Oxford, Surrey, Bath, York, and Cranfield. And so we started basically, the network, which included quite a few, the diverse sort of, the partners, including the UK universities, international universities, businesses, local government, and charities. And since we launched in October, so there is a lot of work going on. So we have already sort of grown actually these partnerships to 38 as we speak. So that shows basically the kind of, the engagement we wanted to have with the sort of non-academic community. So this is the team. So you might have seen some of the people possibly, might know actually some of those, but they come from, the different sort of universities. So, so what exactly we wanted to do in here? So the whole idea has been that I think we all love plants, right? And in fact, I can bet actually that everyone's home, you might have some plants somewhere. So the whole idea has been that we got these plants, but we never do know actually what do they do. So how do they regulate the microclimatic conditions? How do they help actually with the air quality or the noise or the health and well-being, the biodiversity? So there are loads of questions actually in the domain than the answers we know. And it becomes even more important when we're talking about the changing climate, where the outdoor conditions are changing, and that affects our indoors there. So the whole idea of this network came through that sort of thinking, which is also carrying forward the legacy of the Reclaim Network Plus. So if you have not heard about, so I lead that network, which is looking into the green and blue infrastructure implementation in cities. So there's a lot of work on the outdoor side. So this was an opportunity to extend it to the indoor side. So as you can think from most of the networks, so the themes include the engagement and the knowledge exchange, understanding the indoor environmental challenges, integrating greening into buildings, and evaluating the potential of the the indoor greening there. So we have been sort of working to build the network in terms of building the community who is interested in this particular topic. So we know that indoor air quality is a big topic area, and all of you are here because you are interested in it. But this is another sort of dimension to it, that how does this sort of aspect actually do that. So there is a membership which is open, so we welcome you all to sort of join as a member. And there are a number of then the activities which we have designed which will follow to achieve these objectives in terms of the expand our knowledge base. So we have been doing some synthesis reviews, critical guidelines for design and management professionals, and and then finally promoting the wider use of informed greening. So you not only think about the benefits, but also think about the unintended consequences of greening, because sometimes it might do actually more wrong than the goods there. So in a way, how you can involve, so we got these fellowships. So this call is open currently. So if you are ECR, that's a fantastic opportunity. We're going to fund actually the project. So the sandpit call will be coming up very soon. So if you have any idea in this domain, so we'd really welcome you to sort of, apply for this funding. The rapid review, so the team is leading on the rapid reviews that starts from the sources to the health, basically. So I'm leading one of them, looking into the monitoring and modeling approaches to the indoor greening. So if you're interested in participating in the reviews, then just come to me. We have the webinars, which is already started. So if you are interested, you have something, then we would love to have you as a speaker in the webinars there as well. And we'll have the workshop opportunities as well. So if you wanted to run a workshop around it, just let us know and we'll be happy to support. So it's a growing network. There's a lot going on in there. So this is the fellowship I was talking about. So this call is open. So really love to hear from our ECRs if they wanted to do something in this particular area. So the call is open. There is the barcode. If you go onto the website, you can find a lot of information, but also on this particular call there. And as I said, the sandpits are coming, so we are just launching the call very soon. So we'd really love to have as many of you, in the sandpit. It started only a few months back, but we have done quite a lot of work so far in terms of quite a lot of presentations, papers, members are growing, webinars are going on. And the advisory being set it up. So the social medias are already there. So you can follow up on the social media. At the same time, the web page is quite vibrant. So you can have actually most of the information there. And we just submitted revising the 10 questions paper on indoor greening. So that would be something which would be the first product, which might be coming up very soon. So it includes around 40, 50 people actually across the UK and beyond to tackle sort of, the information and the expertise in that. So that's my last slide. Thank you. And you can become a member if you can scan the code. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Prashant. And thank you to all of the leads from the EPSRC micro networks. As I said, I think it's really encouraging to see the funding coming through from EPSRC in this space and the degree of collaboration that's happening. I really feel as though there's a lot of opportunities now, particularly for early career researchers, as well as established researchers and partners, to get involved and take up opportunities such as we've heard, the fellowships, the sandpits, the proof of funding awards, as well as the presentations which will take place online. So thank you. I think it's really encouraging, exciting times. On to the next session now, which is the overview of the HESTIA network. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. My name is Alejandro Moreno, and I'm one of the choirs from the network. I'm based on the Northern Strathclyde, and as you know, Doug is mostly going to be coming over. Over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to be a little bit more strict with timing because I am the one in between you and the lunch, and I don't want to be hung out. So I think probably Douglas is going to start a little bit with the presentation. So we have most of the choirs coming over or if not all of the choirs coming over to do some presentation in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a round robin, and just to say, Alejandro, I don't do very well being told what to do, so I may rebel. I thought that we would start just with a bit of context of where HESTIA has come from. So we've heard a lot already about the significant challenges that we have with housing, and there's a big transition that's underway. Around 20% of our carbon emissions in the UK coming from housing. So if we stand any chance of meeting these net zero objectives that we have, we really need to make sure that housing is a central part of that. We've got very old, leaky buildings in the UK, particularly in comparison to Northern Europe. So a lot of this transition is already underway. Various different means that we heard a bit about earlier, in particular from Brian's presentation, and I was delighted to see that we were one other terminology added to the long list of potential approaches. We heard from Ros earlier about the significant amount of time that we spend indoors. So this figure on the left is a pie chart from a large study actually in the US, but there are comparative figures from the UK and EU showing where we spend most of our time. It's around 90% of it indoors here, 86.9%, but of that, 68.7% at home. So when we think of exposures in indoor environments, they are particularly important. This figure on the right was made by our very talented co-I Amber Yeoman, which is showing some of the different pollution sources within the home. And it isn't supposed to be a figure which terrifies you, thinking of, well, everything is a potential source of pollution exposure, but perhaps it kind of is. You know, there's a lot of different potential sources, both indoors and outdoors, that can affect our exposure, everything from building furnishings to people, pets, and consumer and domestic products. I think one of the points that we really want to make is that health really does start at home. We know the residential environment is a large social determinant of health. The impact of some of these changes that are happening in the residential space, what these mean for broader indoor environmental quality. So everything from lighting, acoustics, thermal comfort and indoor air are not so well known, but also how these impact things like mental health alongside physical health is particularly important. And I'll get onto the equity bit in a moment. You know, we've got these figures here from the BRE that it costs the NHS around £1.4 billion per year. So on the right is a bar chart looking along the horizontal axis of the years 2010 to 2017. On the vertical axis, looking at the percentage of homes that are defined as non-decent. For each year, there are three different coloured bars between owner-occupied, private rented, and all social. I think the good news is that certainly for private rented, we can see that there is an improvement based on this review by Michael Marmot and his team in housing. It's less clear for private owner-occupied and all social housing. So there are some potential considerations for equity that we need to think about in health impacts here. Now, this has come up in various guises already. We want homes to be healthy for people and the planet. So you'll see a lot of different research projects talking about that in terms of aligning health and environmental co-benefits. We know that if we want more energy efficient homes, one of the principal mechanisms that we can do to achieve that is air tightness. If that is done badly without bringing in purpose provided ventilation, that can lead to significant, well, there's an unintended consequence, but I think it's fairly well documented now that if you build airtight without ventilator, you're going to have problems. So we really want to think about airtight, ventilate right. This figure on the right is from James Milner and his group using the example of radon, which is a radioactive gas that comes in primarily through the ground. Second leading cause of lung cancer in the UK, a really significant source of indoor air pollution in certain geographies. And this figure is showing on the vertical axis a projection, on the horizontal axis, sorry, a projection 110 years into the future, and on the vertical axis, the change in life years relative to baseline in thousands. Now, there's various coloured squiggly lines here. What I'd like you to see is that the baseline 0, anything less than that is a negative health impact, anything above that is a positive. The green dashed line, which is the only one that goes above, is a certain form of MVHR being included, whereas all of the others that to varying degrees end up in a negative health impact of air tightness in this case lead to worse impacts, and these are in some cases, I think, the worst being no ventilation and others other forms of mechanical ventilation, but not including heat recovery. Just to make the inequalities a bit more clear, this is some recent work done by the Air Quality Expert Group looking at differentials in air pollution exposure. Looking at damp and mould, two figures on the right-hand side, both showing from the years 2008 to 2020, both on the vertical axis showing the number of houses classed as having damp, the top figure showing it by income quintile, where the red line 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. Quite a clear pattern here that you see that those from a lower income quintile having higher percentage of cases of damp, and on the bottom, based by ethnic group, seeing that in most cases, certainly earlier on, that non-white ethnicities were experiencing more damp homes, but that has been improving over time, illustrating sort of quantitatively some of the potential inequalities associated with damp and mould. One last slide, sort of talking about the inequalities picture. This is from some recent work coming out of the Bourne in Bradford cohort study, and alongside in the Ingenious project. And for those that aren't familiar with all of these various different acronyms, I apologise. I'm going to throw more at you later. I will try to spell them all out. And this is looking at the indoor concentration of PM 2.5 with a box plot figure showing the most deprived on the left to the least deprived, and then a mean daily average concentration. Again, showing a sort of linear pattern between those with the most deprived experiencing worse concentrations compared to the least deprived. And interestingly, when they pulled apart this data, they did see statistically significant differences between rental and home ownership, smoking and non-smoking, terraced and semi-detached versus detached, those with gas and electric cooking, which will come up later, but also some intersectionality based on areas of deprivation and in South Asian homes. Yes. Yeah. So Bradford is a very multi-ethnic city. And this figure that I present on the right-hand side shows a variation based on level of income. You're seeing similar sorts of patterns of greater exposure for South Asian communities compared to other ethnicities in the Bradford study. Yeah. I think this is one of the last slides on sort of the background of where we're coming from. Yes, there's a lot of talk at the moment in this transitioning that's happening in housing as something which we want to be a just transition. So I mentioned earlier that we want to really move behind just having health and environmental co-benefits, but also to add a justice or equity co-benefit. So can the changes that we're making to houses to make them healthier for people on the planet also be a contributing factor to reducing some of the massive health inequalities that we have in the UK? And there's a lovely quote here by Michael Marmot and his team at the Institute for Health Equity that improving housing is about fairness and equity. The greater the deprivation of an area, the less likely people to have good homes. And I include this figure on the right-hand side, which just shows some of the different scales of just transitions that we talk about in the UK. So it's everything from making sure that as we move away from fossil fuel industries that we're providing meaningful employment to people in those industries to at a community level, making sure that some of these transitions are providing benefits to those that are perhaps from left behind communities. Okay, the team, we are all here today, so please do come and chat to us. We'd be really excited to tell you more about our plans. Obviously, we're going to do that in a minute, but I imagine there'll be a lot of questions. So one of the things when pulling together this team we wanted to make sure is that we had quite a different range of academic expertise, different disciplines. I myself am an estranged geographer and environmental social scientist who's found himself in a school of civil engineering. Don't ask how, but we also have public health, mental health, atmospheric chemistry. You know what the problem is when you start to list off the expertise, I'm invariably going to miss one person out, aren't I? Building physics, architecture, chemistry. Please someone shout one of the HESTIA co's if I've missed you, and I apologise. But what we consider quite a broad range of expertise, but certainly not all of the expertise that are required to get this sort of health, environmental and justice co-benefits. I'm going to mention in a moment some of the links we have to some of the clean air networks. We have the project leads of 3 of those networks that are involved. Also several ECRs, early career researchers that were involved in some of those networks, which will come up later as well. Okay, the Clean Air Programme, when I said it's coming up soon, it really is. So Suzanne was the project lead of Transition, Kath Noakes was the lead of Breathing City, and Ruth Adoo-Kissi was the lead of HiCam. And these were really, I mean, we take a lot of inspiration from the work that's gone on in the Clean Air Programme and these clean air networks in the activities that we're doing within HESTIA. And they've driven a lot of the sort of plans that we had about this 3-pronged co-benefits, including a indoor air quality observatory workshop that we had in London, but also some local government workshops that we had through the Clean Air Programme, which really identified housing as a critically important environment for health. bit about who we're working with. We've got several members of our advisory board here today. I think we have Emma, Sani, Livy, and also someone in Maria's stead from Brunel. Yes, good. And lots of project partners. So thank you very much again to Brian from Energy Saving Trust for being one of our keynote speakers. But lots of members, lots of our project partners in the room today as well. And we're really looking forward to working with you on this. Okay, who we're working alongside? This is where all the TLAs come in. Three-letter acronyms for those who don't. I thought that'd get a bigger laugh. So we've got the leads of several of these net zero hubs. So Hearth, Rajat Gupta, Inhabit, which is Zongbo Shi and Ruth Doherty, both in the room. We're doing a lot of similar work looking across indoor air quality, overheating. So we're really trying to make sure that these projects are working together to amplify each other. Health-funded research through NIHR. So we have Into Air in the room as well. Also Born in Bradford Healthy Homes project. And we've just heard from several of these micro networks. So I didn't mention earlier HESTIA. I didn't really. HESTIA is the Greek goddess of the hearth and home. So I'm convinced that is why we were funded, because I'd like to take credit for that myself for coming up with it, but I believe it was Kath. But perhaps conveniently, as the project goes on, I'll forget and I can take ownership of it. But just to say, for people that are in the room, I hope you get a chance to talk to the leads of these other networks. We're really trying to work together, and there'll be a lot that you can learn from linking in with some of these other projects that are going. A bit about our aims, and then there's one last slide for me, because you're probably sick of my voice, before I will pass back over to Alejandro. I mentioned earlier, one of the big aims that we want in this 2 years is to co-develop this health equity-centred engineering approach. We want to make sure that we're getting these co-benefits across health, environment and justice. And rather than explain this figure on the right, we're actually going to sequentially go through these overarching principles, scientific themes and enabling pillars now. And conveniently, the first of the scientific themes, me as a geographer come environmental social scientist, is really interested in the human and social interfaces. So as someone who I wouldn't consider myself to be a techno-optimist, different technologies are clearly going to play a role in helping us align some of these different co-benefits, but there's certainly, I'm not a believer in silver bullets. And quite frankly, the success of many of these different technologies are firmly going to stand on how people end up actually using them. So you can have the world's fanciest sensor, you put it into a home, and it's not aligning with how people actually live their lives. Ultimately, its potential impact is not going to be realised. So this is one of the first scientific themes, and these are used as vehicles for like-minded people essentially to collaborate on it. So we want to make sure that technology is used in a way that is human-centred. And this is now where the merry-go-round begins. Well, I'll pass on to Alejandro.
So I am looking after the technology solutions, and that is a very broad thing here. Like, it's not only sensors that we're installing at home to monitor, but also other things that we do. For example, changing to a smart heating or going in terms of heat pumps, could be any kind of technology that we're getting into the homes. So it's interesting that it's not only the building fabric itself, but as well what we're doing to live and how we're going on behavior towards these new technologies. So the current focus is primarily on the building fabric and the upgrades, but then we have those significant opportunities as well in technologies. And one of the examples that we have here is, for example, that transition to electric cooking. So just looking at that difference between gas and electricity cooking, we know that there will be a change of indoor air quality, potentially PM 2.5, and how that is going to be contributing to households, not only energy, but as well indoor environment, and end of the day as well, a little bit in terms of health on there. And I'll pass it to Raja now.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, and welcome to HESTIA. So I'm Rajat Gupta. I'm looking after the scientific theme on enabling future policy and practice. And we've heard and seen a lot of evidence on this, and especially failures of this when it doesn't come together and work properly. whether it's policy, regulatory, and practice failures. We've obviously seen the Grenfell tragedy, and we've been talking about the Awab's tragedy as well, and the law that's come out. So what we would like to do in this theme is to look at what are the current policies that can help or hinder the creation of these healthy, fairer, and more environmentally sustainable homes. And what changes could better support this in the future. By this, we mean, policies such as the Future Homes Standard that is imminent, I hope, and, will obviously lead to new homes that are being more energy efficient, but also Warm Homes program that looks after the existing homes as well. And are they going to help or are they going to hinder? We are also hindered by our slow rate of retrofits. We don't have enough people trained to put all those heat pumps and technologies we talk about. So, how do we deal with that? Just a stitch. Okay. And what we want to do are a few things in HESTIA. Policy workshops, obviously, which is obviously what is important to bring the right people together. These are informed by our network activities and results from our sandpit feasibility studies. They will also help us to further enhance the research and policy outcomes of the network, and in the end lead to a roadmap for future research and innovation as well, and give those directions that we need for achieving those healthier homes. But we are very mindful that this cannot be done without the deep engagement with ECRs. And our policy workshops will run alongside our policy and impact training, which will be about, obviously about holding events on impactful research for policy, producing briefing documents, which I think, again, will be useful to other networks as well. And also secondments that we have planned between, so these are two-way secondments between the academic institutions and our project partners. And I expect there will be calls out for that too. And they will be targeted towards ECRs, and hopefully that will equip them with the skills to undertake policy-facing research. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Ruth.
Back to me, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay.
You may have noticed that I was a little bit short in my presentation, and it is because I wanted to give you a middle ground in terms of if you have any questions about those scientific links that we have, do it now. Otherwise, we may just follow on.
So a general question that I had that might also help the...
So just to understand the scope of what you mean by indoor healthy environments, because we've heard a lot about indoor air quality, and I feel like, and a little bit about thermal, but we know that, other stuff matters. So, I mean, if this is deliberate, you might want to make it more explicit. And the other point was to what extent you have, or you're aiming to produce a conceptual model. That sounds a boring thing, but about the equity bit, because again, we know that there are the typical social determinants of inequalities are things such as age, but also disability is an interesting one that I haven't heard. And there's a lot of interest now in neurodiversity, for example, and healthy indoor environments. So I'm just saying, it's a massive scope and you need to cut the cake in some way, but you might want to deliberately do that and map out and say, this is what we are doing, this is what we're not doing. So I don't know if that was a question, a comment, sorry.
Who wants to say something?
Just come to the front so people online can see. That's a great question. We are explicit in saying that it's indoor environmental quality, and I completely appreciate that the indoor air quality aspect will be coming through more strongly today. So I think one of the things that probably some of the other networks need to reflect on is, I think in particular, how we can reach out to the folks in acoustics and lighting. Now, I know there is a Noise Network Plus that has just been funded, so that is a conversation that we need to have. In terms of the conceptual model around equity, we're certainly bringing to HESTIA the sort of work we did through HICAM, which Ruth will talk about in a moment, which brings in this sort of multidimensional environmental justice framework, which isn't just about the who gets what of inequalities, but the underlying reasons why those inequalities exist in the first place and continue to persist. And that goes from everything from classism, racism, sexism, differential capabilities, who has a voice in, this came up in Ros's presentation earlier, I'll pass over to in just a moment, who's respected as knowing about a poor indoor environment, but then also what people can actually do about it. Ros, did you want to come back on that? Let me pass you the mic.
We are where we are in society today about the division. And the whole pushback. So when we're talking about inequality in health, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, let me get Doug to clarify this about the South Asians, because the intersection, because I don't want to be accused. Oh, there she goes. Seriously, there is that pushback. And I also see, although it depends on where you are, this isn't a political point of view, but I'm talking about maybe Ed Miliband, who kind of gets a lot of this stuff that, net zero driving down. But I also see the pushback he gets against it. And when I listen to some of the things, I'm like, right, if you're going out talking about this now, you need to be and it's because, not that I am definitely not scared to mention anything, but I know there's going to be a whole heap of, and you can't live in silence. It's amazing when you're amongst your fellow, colleagues and stuff. I feel like you can say what you want to say and they kind of get you. But the moment you step outside that, and if you're public speaking, I would say careful, because that or someone once said, have you ever been scared to say anything? Technically, no. I think I got the most I will ever get when it came to ULAs and the pushback against that. When it comes to racism, I can take it. I know my children at some point thought, why are you doing this when you're getting all this heat? So from where I started till now, the climate has definitely changed. And now when I see someone puts up a study, I will now question them about it, just so that I know I will go and read it about, but just so that I know when I'm on a platform or if I tweet anything, and I'm not going to get into right wing or left wing, but if people come back at me and say things, I have an answer for it. And for me, it's never really about race. And I've always said that when someone once mentioned about my color, I was like, close your eyes and just listen to what I'm saying. The color of my skin obviously is never going to change. And if that's the only reason why you're against me, but I don't hide away from it. It's because of the profile I have and where I am. And that's why, in case people wondered why I got you to clarify it, I just thought I should just mention that it is so divisive right now, and what's going, and everything seems to be linked somewhere to race rather than class, quite interesting enough. And that's all I wanted to say, in case someone went, why is she asking him to clarify that? That's why I actually did.
I think I'll just be quick so we can pass on. I appreciate having the opportunity to make a clarification, and just to dispel any ideas of the current members of HESTIA having all the ideas. No, we don't. That's the whole point. We're a network designed to grow, and that's why we have things like public members and we're online. You can help sure that the communications that come out of the network are done in a way which is going to be most productive to achieving the sort of goals that we want. And so thanks for your contribution, Ros. I'll pass back over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Rosamund, for such a great, inspiring start to the day. I just wanted to say that. So building the HESTIA community. So I guess from my experience, I started with funding under a Clean Air programme, and Gary's here and Suzanne are some of the champions. That was the really inspiring programme that brought a lot of people together. And one of the things we wanted to do uniquely in HiCam was build an early career researcher network. And it's just been such a pleasure, because Amber was telling me how busy she is. And she's no longer an early career researcher. She's a co-I, as is Doug, as is Alejandro. But we started off we managed to get the funds for a writing retreat at a haunted hall in Lancashire. And we wrote a 10 questions paper that Doug led on the future of residential indoor air quality. Did I get that title right, Doug?
Environmental justice.
And it's environmental. That's why I wanted to bring you in, so you could, so environmental justice. Doug is really keen that, that's central, as well as health, to HESTIA moving forward. Okay, so the idea of HESTIA inclusive interdisciplinary. So I've worked in interdisciplinary research a long time. Intersectorial. It's just so great to see people with lived experience and working in policy, government, and practice of all sorts here. Have I got the right slide? Yeah. It's that way down. Okay. So we want to really build this community, not just researchers. We've got project partners. I'm just looking at Livy. We'll be able to learn from your lived experience and working with public members. That'll be really great. We want to really develop this as a community that's more than just a bunch of academic researchers, with the idea of co-creation, research priorities, activities. So we'll have joint webinars, or we've maybe started to have joint webinars with the networks, which is really, really good to harmonise. I'm really excited to see that. This is our first in-person assembly. Don't take a photo of my glasses and sunglasses. Never mind. We've also talked about work sites. We have a website that's ready. Okay. Newsletters, LinkedIn as our social media, and the sandpit is common to all our funded Mic plus networks, and the ability to coordinate across the other. So these are really good. Okay.
So yeah, as Roberta has already said, and we've alluded to many times, we're really hoping you will come together with us to develop. And I think just coming back to your question, yeah, I think let's see what is most important to everybody in this room, to people online, to other people in the network. I think we're not coming with a very and so we're really keen to bring these people from different disciplines and sectors and lots of different perspectives together through the things that Ruth and Rajat have already talked about, but also through our advisory board, our meetings with public members, and also trying to bring people together around different themes to develop working groups and hopefully drive this acceleration of research towards healthier home indoor environments. So as you've heard from lots of the other Network Plus networks already, we will also be doing a sandpit. So I don't know if you've ever it's kind of a fun. There's no sand, which I think is really sad.
We can change that.
Yeah, we should change it. Let's change it. Let's have some sand. I think that would be much more fun. Let's create some kind of actual models of things. Maybe that's I come from mental health, but maybe in engineering they actually do practical things. Let's do that, as we see in the picture here. So our plan is to hold this in kind of early summer, and we really want to bring lots of people here today online, people who are not here with us, so researchers and non-academic organisations, really together to start to decide on and develop these feasibility studies, start to think about how can we do this kind of initial ground work, proof of concept work, to then accelerate towards much bigger funding applications later. And similar to the other networks, we want people to come to those events, and the person to then, after the event, we're not going to make you pitch. I have done one of those myself, literally pitch on the day for the money. It's very stressful. I've come from mental health. I want to make this an easy, fun experience for you. So a little bit after the Sandpit event, we want people who attended that event to bring other people who weren't in the room together to pitch for small amounts of money for kind of 6-month or 9-month awards to get some of that work started. And we'll come back to that this afternoon. I'm going to get you in an activity, the last activity of the day, to wake you up, to help us think, what should the focus of that research in those sandpits be? Okay, great. So we will talk about it later. I will now pass on to the lovely Amber.
Thank you. So our research theme of developing future leaders, which is led by myself and Anna, is just a fancy way of saying that we have an early career researcher, or ECR network. So it's been mentioned a couple of times that we've taken a lot of inspiration with HESTIA from the HiCam network. And it was actually the HiCam ECR network where myself, Alejandro, Doug, and a host of other early career researchers met. And it was a fantastic opportunity to build collaborations between different institutions and researchers from different disciplines. So myself, I am an atmospheric chemist, and I now have these great connections with people from geography, mental health, building, architecture, that I wouldn't have been able to do so if it weren't for the HiCam network. So we wanted to be able to afford the opportunity to the next generation of ECRs with our HESTIA network. So we will be leading it and supporting the ECRs with the COI team, building those interdisciplinary partnerships, and allowing our ECRs to create different activities. For example, grant writing workshops, fellowship support, collaborative paper writing, So as an example, again, this has been mentioned before, we have a screenshot here on the left-hand side, no, the right-hand side. You think I'd know from my left and right. I'm actually a yoga teacher and I don't know my left from right when I'm teaching. It's a screenshot from our collaborative paper, 10 questions concerning the future of residential indoor air quality and its environmental justice implications, which I think was the most positive research output and impact that we've had from our HiCam network. Just goes to show what is possible for our HESTIA ECR network. We will allow our ECRs some involvement in coordinating our sandpits just to give them some experience of how to do so. But really, it's going to be ECR led. So the idea is that they will come together and they will decide what sorts of outputs, activities they would like to do to really help build them in their careers and start to move away from their supervisors and line managers and build themselves as independent researchers, as we were able to do in the HiCam network. So at the moment, we have managed to recruit 11 ECRs from 4 institutions. Although it's only 4 institutions, they actually range across different research, different activities, different departments. 3 PhD students, 8 early career postdoc researchers. And the idea for the moment is to keep this network quite small so that they can have a lot of ownership on it, you know, not too many cooks in the kitchen, and so that they can start to build those connections between one another, and then the potential to invite more ECRs in the coming future. That's everything from me.
So as the screen says, any questions?
Hi. Yeah, I've got a question that's kind of been bubbling in my mind all morning, really, which is that presumably the calls for funding and the kind of headlines of all these programs that are all about decarbonisation, but it's not necessarily the highest carbon homes that are the most unhealthy. And there are a lot of homes that are not going to be subject to decarbonisation action, which are also unhealthy. And I'm wondering how much the research is kind of hog-tying itself, or having been hog-tied by whoever's providing the funding, EPSRC or whoever, and whether just by always looking at retrofit and carbon retrofit, and I was struck listening to Brian, is it energy, is it carbon, is it bills? All these aims of retrofit are specific, but none of them centre health. And I'm just wondering whether we're kind of looking at it the wrong way round, and whether we should really be thinking about how can we make homes healthier, and can we kind of piggyback on these various programs that there are and use their money to bring forward into healthier homes. If something decarbonises and makes a place healthier, then yeah, we'll take the money and do the action. If it decarbonises and actually makes people colder because the heat pump's not very well set up. So it's kind of trying to, you know, do we have to confine ourselves to the decarbonisation programme because that's what the funders want, or, you know, can we secretly look a bit wider than that?
I don't know if I have all the answers. I just feel like I'm the one who should try at least. That is an amazing question, Kate. And I'd say that's one of the reasons why we're so happy to have Passive House Trust and Sustainable Development Foundation as a project partner. Now, I'm going to mix up here between my scientific themes, my overarching principles, and my enabling pillars. I believe it's an overarching principle. We've got technology, health, and equity and justice. Now, the sorts of projects that we'll look to fund in the sandpit will be addressing at least 2 of those 3 different things. So that is a really interesting research question. I think certainly it's something that would be in scope for the sorts of things that we might want to look at in a sandpit, to say, well, actually, what can we do in the homes that are already doing all right from a climate point of view and are just extremely unhealthy? So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Maybe online? Oh, Marcella?
Understand what you would. So I just wanted to know, because clearly we, you know, for example, you mentioned lighting, sound, ECR. So I already was thinking, I know, you know, lighting colleagues, ECR colleague, that could be very relevant. So how would you recommend that we put them your way? What would be the best way of doing so?
So I can use the mic here. So at the end, we will have a QR code where you can join to become a member. And that is somewhere where you can outline your specific interests, expertise, and of those scientific themes that you might want to contribute to. So that would be wonderful. If that becomes too complicated, a simple email, and then either me or Denise Groves, our network manager, can put them in touch with the right person. Did you want to come on that as well, Helen?
We will, in the next few weeks, release the advert for people to attend the sandpit and start coming and start developing those ideas around those broad themes and some of the questions that will hopefully come out of this afternoon. So we'll also encourage you to share that widely, and it would be great to have people that we haven't really thought about having in this room come to that and get involved in developing the ideas and bid for some of the money. That would be amazing and create that collaboration. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Just quite a technical question about your sandpits, because I've not been involved in one of these network pluses. Is it just for the people that are affiliated to the organisations that are partners in the project?
No.
Can it go? Does it go wider to people who are already at HEIs? And does it go wider again? Because like Rosamund's nodding, lots of people write to me with good ideas for small projects and investigations that they would like to do. And, they're just either individuals or small companies. Are they eligible to take part in your sandpits?
Yeah, so we will open it up to...
And to be awarded money?
Yeah, so, I think with the money, let's just be clear, once we get down to the money part, it will have to be held by a university, but it can involve lots of people. So there can be money flowing. It has to go through a university account, but it can flow to other people. But for the sandpit, we absolutely want people who are researchers but are from non-academic organisations as well to come along. And then when they bid for the money after the event, you need one person who's leading that application to have attended the event, and they will need to be based at university so we can get the money to flow. But we will expect a non-academic partner to be involved and a member of the public or the affected community in that application. So the money can flow to those people. That's absolutely
And it's the
fine.
same rules for all the other network pluses?
I think broadly, but there might be some differences between them.
I think it's the same. Especially depending on what the goal.
Can we just pass the mic, otherwise people online?
I guess this is the same for all the networks. So anybody can apply, depending on what individual networks have written. So I guess there is also a focus on ECRs to lead those projects because they are smaller projects. I think there is a little catch there, though. I don't know, might be different for different networks because you can only pay 80% FEC. So if your university is filling up that 20% gap, that's a different story. Otherwise, it's the same what you get from the UKRI, you pay forward. They still expect actually 100% FEC as an expenditure.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks for this morning. Generally, this last session kind of is an extension of what we've heard all morning, and it's great to hear it going on. And I just wanted, if you'll forgive me for 2 minutes, just to say something that I think is quite important in some respects, is that this is part of a long journey. I have a distant relative called Christopher Addison, who became the first Minister of Health in the Lloyd George government in the turn of the last century. And after the First World War, he was made Minister of Reconstruction as a result of what happened in the UK. And of course, that wasn't just about the war, it was about the dreadful housing that he appreciated as Minister of Health at that previously, that was the cause of Britain's dreadful poor health. He was immediately sacked by the government as soon as he started to work in this area to increase the housing. And the reason I'm saying this is that politics is a really important part of this. I know we're not allowed to sort of talk about it or think about it, but you'll all know from picking up your daily newspaper or watching on the internet what's happening at the moment. And we've got to navigate that difficult area. And the only way we can do it effectively is through science and through really good quality research. And I think in a way, that's why I see this, what you're all doing, as being absolutely crucial at this moment in time, because the politics is not going in your favor, especially with the pressure from over the Atlantic. So it really, really is more than just the research. This and the impact you're going to get. Look, it is about changing the narrative. And I know you're all going to come across this as you go through this time. You're going to get this wind that will hit you, and it'll become quite stressful at times, I suspect. So in a way, coming together like this will help you navigate those winds. And I think, you need to consider that as part of the remit, really, is to engage the politics, not the big P, but the small p, so that you can argue your case so strongly through science, because that's the only way, at the end of the day, that these conflicts will be actually sorted out. Thank you.
There is one question here, and I'll be back with you.
I'm always scared of using a microphone. It's got quite a loud voice. It was just a thought and sort of question on the decarbonisation context, in such that you could potentially be looking at buildings and indoor spaces that haven't been retrofitted or decarbonised that may need it, and then have a baseline for that context and see what happens when they do, right? And vice versa, you could look at buildings that have been decarbonised, what the conditions are there already. I'm assuming you don't have to have some sort of process of retrofit occurring during any studies that you deliver. Yeah, so it probably broadens it out a little bit more than the sort of confines of it being entirely decarbonisation focused.
Can I just make the minor point that we talked a lot about retrofit. It's design and retrofit, so we'll be looking across the full suite, not just, but good question, thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions online?
This is somewhat not rogue, but actually it's a question for you, Prashant. So thank you, Peter, online. Got a question about Green Inn. And Peter asks, thinking of how some microbes can absorb pollutants, besides carbon capture and oxygen production, are you researching or discovering any plants that are really effective at extracting any pollutants from the air? So
Thank you. That's a very difficult and an interesting question. We got the plant scientists involved in it, so I really don't understand a lot about the plant dynamics. But the idea is to have a look at what sort of plants actually could be most appropriate under different conditions. Because let's say in the households, over the year, you see that the environmental conditions changes, right? So during summers, you might have very different conditions compared with the winters. So yes, we will be doing that. But I think the networks really doesn't allow us to do a lot in terms of investigating those, those things in detail. However, if the person who has asked the question has got interest in taking this idea forward, we will have the opportunity to fund them basically through the SENPIT programs. So we'll be very happy to support that. That looks a very relevant question. Thank you.
So thank you very much, everyone, for coming online. We're going to shut down the call now. Thanks very much. Looking forward to engaging more in the future.